Please.
Ladies and gentlemen of the committee, thank you very much. My name is Brett Bass. I'm a firearms instructor at Bellevue Gun Club and a military policeman in the U.S. Marine Corps Reserve. I would also like to voice my opposition to Senate Bill 6620 for the same reasons that Keeley has already mentioned. Violent crimes are overwhelmingly committed with handguns. And when we start talking about good policy, we have to understand that good policy addresses the majority case and not the marginal one. In Washington State, according to the Washington Association of Sheriffs and Chiefs of Police, there were over 1,100 violent crimes committed in the state in 2016 with handguns, and there were around 50 committed with rifles of all sorts, to include the types that are going to be controlled by this legislation. The training director at my range was a 3-gun competitor when he was 16 years old. And legislation of this type would have prohibited from him getting into that. And of course, the folks that would be most heavily affected by this are the ones that are least likely to be doing anything bad. So if we're going to look at the marginal case and dictate policy based on that, that's not good policy. So I'd like to voice my support for the first half of this legislation. Getting additional security procedures in place for schools is laudatory, and I think all of us can support that. But the idea that we need to strip civil rights from people who fall into a certain age bracket, who could volunteer for the draft, who could join the armed forces and be issued a fully automatic rifle within a month of getting to MCRD San Diego, for example, I find somewhat unreasonable. So I encourage you to please consider the majority case and not the marginal one, particularly if you look at the age range of people who have actually committed mass shootings in schools. The general age range is between 22 and about 46. So if we're going to say that people under the age of 21 are the principal cause of the problems here, I don't see that being the case. And if you look at school-specific mass shootings, of the most recent 19 high-profile ones, rifles of any sort were only used in 11 or 12 of those. So if we're going to look at the majority case, we should dictate our policy based on that and not the marginal one. Thank you.
Please. Okay, I'm gonna let Senator Ranker ask a question.
Thank you, and it's actually along those same lines, so for Keeley, but also for the other panelists. So this bill deals with both age and the background check, the enhanced background check at the state level, not just the federal level. At a time when mass murders in our schools are becoming the norm, don't we owe it to our children to acquire the same background checks and age limits for an assault rifle or a tactical weapon as we do for handguns?
May I?
Please.
So to address that, I think that we owe it to our children to make sure that the civil rights that those that have their legally adults are respected. Again, I don't think any of us here objects to the background check requirement. The enhanced background check that we have in Washington State, I think, is very reasonable and very effective. The idea that we would subject the purchase of entirely common, entirely mainstream types of rifles, the AR-15 specifically, is somewhere between 1 and 2 and 5 of all firearms in the United States that are manufactured and sold today. That absolutely meets the criteria of being in common use as per the U.S. Supreme Court's requirements there. And the idea that we would take something that is used in a vanishingly small number of, granted, particularly horrific crimes, but then sort of neglect the fact that the reason that we have that background investigation for the sale of handguns is because they make up the overwhelming preponderance of homicides and violent crimes, I think sort of loses sight of the true objective there.
Thank you. Senator Becker.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I'm just having a little trouble understanding in the rifles. Part of the testimony I heard that is if we adjust the stock of the gun, that would be illegal, but I'm shorter than other people in my arm's reach, and I'm thinking of my 270. If I adjusted that to fit me, would I be breaking this law?
Speak to that.
To the best of my knowledge, no. The idea is that if a rifle, for example, if your 270 was semi-automatic and had a detachable magazine, if its buttstock was adjustable, it would then no longer be legal for somebody who was, for example, 19 years old to purchase at retail. So the idea that having the adjustable buttstock itself would be a defining characteristic is part of how the bill is worded.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, panel. We'll go to the next panel, please.